Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. How the heck are you doing? We are mid-October by the time you hear this. Do you celebrate Halloween? How is the fall going? It's raining here today. I'm recording in the very beginning of September, but it's like 81 degrees and we're having summer rains and it's very humid. Anyways, I think you're really going to love today's episode with Jen, and I think it is so relatable. So the gist of what we're talking about is somebody came to me upset because they said that I shared something that they had shared with me with someone else. I'm not so sure that I actually shared that information. I went into a fawn response of, "You're right, I'm sorry, thank you for telling me." And I'm not so sure that that happened, but there were a number of other things that happened in this communication that were really not okay with me. And I was not able to say anything in the moment. And what Jen and I talk about is the rumbling that I'm having now of, do I say something? Do I not? And we talk about this, comes up with my clients all the time, that it's easier sometimes to sit with the familiar discomfort of all the stuff that's going on in my head than to say something and have to deal with the potential things that this person could say to me in response. And towards the end of this interview, I probably should put this in the outro, but I'll just let you know now. Jen says something and I get really tearful, and I say that I'm tearful. And Jen cracks a joke about coming to San Diego. And once we stopped recording, she said, "I could see that you were getting emotional, and I didn't know if I should lean in and kind of help you process through that." Because a really young part came up for me, and I talk about what it is that was coming up for me, or if she needed to back off and kind of crack a joke. And so she made a choice to crack a joke, which I'm fine with. But I said, I really would have been okay if we leaned into it and went a little bit deeper, because I think that you, the listener, probably would enjoy and appreciate watching that process. And obviously, there is a really young part that has come up for me in this that feels unsupported and wants all of you to be there with me to confront this person, to go like, "Hey, what you said wasn't okay, and these are the things that were not okay." Anyways, I think it's very relatable. I ask for your feedback if you want to give me your feedback, if this resonates, because I know that y'all have experienced, do you say something when somebody says something that's not okay? Do you not? Do you let it go? And it's causing me a lot of distress, whether I'm saying something or not. So what's the best way for me to show up? And I may have said this at the end of the episode because Jen and I talked a little bit afterwards, but we're all humans. We're doing the best that we can. And in my adult, I have a right to have a voice and say, "Hey, there's the content of what you shared with me, but some of the ways that you told me aren't okay with me. And I don't appreciate that. And I wouldn't speak to you that way." Will I share that with this person? Won't I? I don't know. I will do a follow-up episode if there's something that comes out of this. I'm still in the middle of processing, but my guess is that it is incredibly relatable. And my hope is that you will enjoy it. So now, on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi, Patricia. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. We took a month off of recording in August. We still talked frequently, but I've missed recording with you. I'm glad we're back.
Yes, me too. I was just thinking that. I was really excited to be back.
Yeah. Should we just jump in?
Sure.
Okay. So we're going to talk about something I think all of you can relate to. We're going to just try and keep it as anonymous as possible. And I think both of us are having a little bit of like, "Ooh, can we do this?" And because this is still going on for me, feel like I'm still in the story and I don't know how succinctly I can relay what's going on. So I'm going to do my best. And Jen, please feel free to hop in because you've been with me this whole way. So somebody, we're going to call him Melvin for the sake of conversation, shared something with me. I think it's been a month, maybe 5 weeks ago. And that was, I didn't really think about it. And then recently he approached me and said, "I need to talk to you about something." And he said, "You shared this with somebody else that was private. I don't want my business being spread around." And the first thing that happened is I went into a fawn response. So we know fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And fawn is You're right. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for telling me. I had no idea what he was talking about. And I just went into this. My little heart is pounding.
Oh, even now, just talking about
I
it.
know, and that's making me
Oh,
mad. And again, I'm sharing this with you listeners because I know that this is relatable. I know that this is relatable. So I go into this total fawn. I'm so glad you told me. Thank me. I have no idea if I told anybody. I have one person that I tell things to. I have one person that's my go-to person. And so I didn't say anything in the moment. And as y'all know by this podcast, Jen and I both share a lot of pretty personal, intimate things that most people don't share. And so there is a part of me that thinks that I may share information not thinking that it's private because, Jen, you and I share very authentically, very openly, very vulnerably about things that most people wouldn't talk about. So while he's talking to me, I'm thinking, did I say something to someone and not think that it was something he never said, don't tell, this isn't not confidential. And so I'm kind of bewildered in the moment. Now, couple of things that he did say that were absolutely not okay with me. And because I was in that fawn response, I didn't say anything. He said, "You're a therapist. I would expect you to be more sensitive." And he points to my unapologetically sensitive podcast decal that's on my car. The implication is that I'm a therapist all the time and that everybody in the world is held to the same standard of confidentiality. Jen, I see you shaking your head. So
mm. I just like, oh, for anybody out there who loves a therapist is in your family, your sister, brother, whoever, neighbor, I don't care who, please, 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 like that. Oh, that's hit me in different situations, not the one you're talking about, but being held to this, really impossible standard
mm-hmm.
of showing up in the world in such a way. We're just playing, there's a specific role we're doing as a therapist, and to expect that role to be done in intimate relationships or even casual ones is just, yeah, no, it's not right.
Which is why it's unethical to have dual relationships as a therapist with your clients, meaning that
That's
you're
right.
not friends with your clients. You don't sell things or borrow things or, teach things or take classes from your clients because then the relationship gets complicated and you cannot stay in that clean role of being a therapist. We're human beings first and foremost. Jen and I are here to talk about what it's like to be a messy human, and we're both human first. And then we have these roles. So to hold that against me, first of all, not okay.
No, it's a deep misunderstanding too of even informed consent and the contractual agreement of confidentiality. And yeah, and obviously when someone tells us, hey, I need to share something, we can take it in confidence. I know that you would.
Absolutely.
But another thought that I was having too is I wanted to ask you, and maybe for the listeners too, what is the level of intimacy that you have with Melvin? Because if it's not that intimate, it's just someone that you know casually and they share this information, the access to that information is like, what's your level of access? What's your clearance level, right? There are some people that have high security clearance levels, high clearance levels, right? In our lives and who we talk to. So if you are experienced with him, and I happen to know, I think correctly, that this is not a close person. This is someone in, yeah, right. This is someone who is in community with you, but not a super close person.
No.
So I would assume that if someone was telling me that and I'm like on clearance level grade 10 and I'm not up at the top upper echelons, that generally anyone that's at my level might know. I'm not even saying that you said something because you may not have in this situation. I think, this person was going through something and is probably angry and looking for a safe person to unload on.
Yeah.
It was kind of part of my take, but
Yeah. Yeah. And confidentiality with my clients, I take very seriously. And if you were in my circle and you say, don't share, that is very important to me. I also suspect because I had initiated conversation, I had a question and I said, this may be totally inappropriate. It was something I was curious about just due to the nature of this. And I said, feel free to not answer. And he chose to answer. And so I'm also wondering if he let me in at a level that was not, that he felt uncomfortable about. And so this is also, his kind of coming back at me because maybe he shared more than he felt I don't know. But I was very clear about giving him permission, like, you don't have to answer this, but I'm kind of curious about this. Yeah.
Yes.
the other things that he said during this is he told me that you'll probably have feelings that come up about this, but I'm not going to process it with you. Again, just go ahead and respond, Jen.
I'm almost aghast at that right now. Because again, things happen in a context, right? So what I was saying before was really is like, what context does this person have in your life? And so, all right, I'm going to drop a bomb in your lap, or I'm going to really project and take some of my upset out on you, which I think is what happened, part of it. And then good luck with that. Right?
Yeah.
I'm now leaving you alone in this. So again, this just speaks to, this is not what I would consider an intimate relationship. And if that was said in an intimate relationship, I would assume it was like taking space or something that there was going to come back to process together.
Right.
But to just be like, and I don't know, I'm so curious when you said that, like, how did he say that? Because I know for me as a deep processor, if I'm talking to somebody who's not a deep processor, it'll be like, all right, I know you're going to go process it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, another, you're an HSP and a weirdo kind of a thing. I don't know. How did he say it?
It felt paternalistic. Like, I know you're going to have feelings about this, but you're going to need to deal with it somewhere else. It's kind of like, I know you're going to be irrational, hysterical. That's not what he said. But I just feel like you don't even know me. And that may have even impacted even more of my fawning response. My fawn response is like to not be emotional, to just be like, you're right. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for telling me, like an automated roboton. I don't think roboton is the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Automaton. Robot and automaton. I love it. See, language is alive and you're being creative with it. And I knew exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah. And then he said, we're still friends. It's like letting me know that this is an eruption that's going to ruin the relate. We're still friends. And then he said, I haven't told anybody else of, the people that we hang out with. And here's the kicker. This stays between us.
So yeah, there's a lot of controlling the narrative there and not allowing you to have any kind of authentic response at all. And it sounds like that actually is the origination of the issue, right? Because there's was something, and this may be part of our confidentiality right now and not mentioning what the thing was, but trying to control the narrative, trying to control what goes out, how people respond. And this is a game that as humans we get into with ourselves, right? I sometimes call it like shadow boxing. Like if I do this, then they'll do that, then they'll do that. And we do. We like to have control and we don't. Right. And you can't do that to people. You can't control how the other person reacts. And you are entitled to your process and to reaching out to people for support, and to try to intimidate you or threaten you into silence is a big problem.
Right. So there are two issues for me that are going on. One is the content. Did I share that information with someone? And I'm still not really clear about that. And because it was so long ago, and I'm assuming it's this one conversation that we had, I don't even know for sure. And what I did was, so I made up a story in my head that the one person that I think that I shared it with was hanging out with him the day that he talked to me about this. And so I made up a story in my head that this other person must have said something to him, not remembering that this isn't something to share. Not that I would have said, don't share this, but I have one person I share things with. I'm just saying. So I waited 24 hours till I saw this person and asked them, and they're like, you never even told me that information. And I may or may not have, I don't know. But what this person said is, I was hanging out with this other person who told me what you just told me. So this person's assumption was that this other person who talked to my one person probably said something to Melvin about it. I don't know. So there was a week that passed. And so this other person is somebody that I'm relatively close to. And I said, I want to talk to you about something when I see you face to face. And I said, did I share this information with you? And the person said, no. This other person, this is now we're adding another person I haven't even talked about. Somebody else said this to this person. So I am not the only person that's sharing information, and it didn't go through the people that I talked to. So Melvin has shared this with more than just me.
Yeah. Yeah. Which just makes me really curious about him choosing you as the person that leaked.
Right.
And, whenever there's, I don't know, I'm not sure if this will serve it or help the situation, but if I can just throw it out there that this other person that maybe could have been a candidate to leak the information was male,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know if this is some sort of just like unacknowledged misogyny or falling into all of those, I don't know, whatever the stereotypes are or stuff, but, to come and then pick on you
Mm-hmm.
pisses me off for you. I'm so mad.
It pisses me off too. And, regarding the content, which is, I think, the smallest part of this whole conversation, because what we're going to talk about next is what's going on for me if I want to talk to him about it, how upset I get when I talk about it. It's taking up a lot of energy. We'll get to that in a minute. But regarding the content, if I did share, I'm curious to know what did I say and who did I say it to so that I can look at my behavior and see, do I need to make a course correction, even though there was no request for confidentiality. I do care about my relationships. That is important to me. And if you give me feedback, I prefer that it be specific so that I can go back to that time and look at what it was. And so to give me this kind of vague thing, what I'm thinking is probably 5 weeks after it happened, and I don't even know what happened, makes it really hard to understand what did I say and do and to correct my behavior. So that in itself is problematic. At this point, I don't think it is such a focus point. I think all the other things that you and I have been talking about that we're going to go on to talk about is really more of what my concern is at this point. But I'm still curious to know about, gosh, did I say something? And if I did, then maybe I need to look at that. I don't know. I don't think that I did, though. Other than my one chosen person, I don't think that I would have gone to anybody else and said anything.
Yeah. And I'm hearing that even in your fawn response, what you're calling it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that when you're threatened or when you're feeling up, right, it's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or fib. No, I didn't. And that's just an automatic response. That is not a character thing or, it just can kind of come flying out of us. But from when you told me the story, even in that fawning response, it shows that this is what you care about, right? You were like, I'm sorry, I think, right? Like right away.
Yeah.
Which I probably would do too, right? Just this.
Thank you so much for telling me. I really appreciate it.
Right.
Now
right.
I just want to throw it all over myself. Had I had the awareness, I think I would have said, I hear what you're saying. Can you let me sit with this? And if I did something wrong, I'm really willing to apologize. I need to sit with this and I will get back to you. That's in retrospect what I wish I would have said. But go ahead, Jen.
I do understand that. And I guess the way I was thinking of it, I was going to ask you to please not be hard on yourself about that because it does show your willingness to be in community and to want to come to understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I get that it's an automatic response and I get the ways in which it's problematic. And I think it also just points to how sincere you are about making, an apology. And sometimes we do make apologies for things where we're not quite sure what we did wrong.
Well, and I think as women, this happens more often, especially when we're confronted by men. I think that there's some patriarchy. I think there's some paternalism. There's definitely control in the narrative about we'll still be friends. I haven't told anybody. You don't tell anybody either. Like, you don't get to control that.
Say any of that. No.
And my thought is, fine, if you want to tell all of our friends that I shared this information, tell them. I don't care. If they have an issue, they'll come to me. And I get to talk to whomever I want to about this to get my own clarification and my own healing. And you don't get to control the narrative. That's just not okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that that's the really problematic piece of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And it felt like that comment about, well, you're a therapist and I thought you'd be more sensitive. Like, that's a shaming thing to say. That would be like me going back and saying, that was an unkind thing to say. That would be like me saying, no wonder you have problems in your relationships, that would be an unkind thing to say. And that was totally unnecessary and uncalled for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And ignorant, really. I mean, just ignorant of what they're even talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So where I'm at now is really struggling, Jen, you and I think going back and forth about this. This is not a significant relationship. Because of the friends that I hang out with, chances are I will see him on a regular basis. So this isn't somebody that's not going to be in my life. Is he important? Do I value the relationship? No. But is this someone who will be in some of the circles that I pass in? Yes. And when I saw him a while after he confronted me, I just like, I saw him. I just thought, F you. I was angry and I was resentful. And you talked to me about that because part of me says it's not worth the time and energy that it's bringing up for me to confront him, to say like, these things are just not okay. It's, my heart starts to pound. My head starts spinning. I start thinking of all these things. I'm not having peace. And if I'm showing up and feeling angry and resentful, you had a really interesting comment about that. Do you recall what you said?
Well, you're not at peace anyway.
No, I'm not at peace.
Right. No, I'm trying to remember. What did I say?
It was something about how I think we as women absorb this stuff so that other people are more comfortable. That he shows up and who knows what he's feeling, but I don't say anything, but I'm having all this energy.
Yeah. I had a client say to me not too long ago, I'm comfortable being uncomfortable to make other people comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that as women, we are taught from a really young age to be polite, be nice, don't make anyone uncomfortable, don't ruffle feathers. And honestly, I think that probably comes from some kind of survival tactic that really made sense when coming out of being oppressed, as women, and not being given rights and not having access to even our own finances, right? Like 1974.
Women were finally allowed to have their own credit.
No mortgages, right? Without a father, brother, husband, signing on. So
that's not that long ago.
That is not that long. It's frighteningly recent.
Yeah.
So like we don't need our appendix anymore, right? Or something like that. It's like, I feel like this is, and his behavior is kind of left over where this is okay. And it's not okay.
Right.
But of the time, you might not have had any real resources. It may have been dependent.
Yeah. So the things that are coming up for me right now is part of me is wanting to say something because I don't like being spoken to that way and I want to have a voice. And before we recorded, Jenna and I were kind of saying, I'm very clear that I don't want to identify him. I don't want to have this get back to him. And being able to talk about it on a podcast is a little bit talked about things coming out sideways. That's what it was, that it comes out, that energy comes out sideways. And I think in some ways this is coming out sideways. Although I know from almost every single client that I work with, we have talked about this. And I tell people, so the familiar discomfort is what I'm rumbling with. The unfamiliar discomfort is if I say something and then having to anticipate if he comes back with something, and that unknown and just how much my heart pounds when I talk about him. I'm like, ugh, do I want to do that? And I'm constantly encouraging my clients to push through it. And now here I am and it's in my face. And I'm like, ugh, I don't know that that's something that I want to do.
Yes. Pushing through that discomfort, I think, is important. I remember saying that. In fact, you're the one who said to me a while ago about things coming out sideways. I also had a coach I was working with that said, things will come out sideways if we're not direct communication, right? So we know that for years, direct communication was not something women could do for lots of reasons. Once it made sense and it was a matter of survival. And so we were trained, mothers, grandmothers, right, to not be direct and to be uncomfortable and to save ourselves from some greater discomfort probably. And I wonder about this fear, like you're really afraid to say something, and then what's this person going to say to you? You know where this comes up for me? With like road rage type stuff. I'm like, why aren't they afraid of me? Like they should be just as afraid of me as I'm afraid of them, But the truth is that's not our historical context, right? That's not where that's coming from. We could say that there's another story there for another time, but coming out sideways and sacrificing direct communication and being uncomfortable doing so. So this isn't about him. It's not about whether or not he's worth it, right? It's really about, can you take the opportunity to step into and risk, and do you have the support of your community to do so, to be direct instead of having it come out sideways? So, I'm just imagining you being in community and being grumpy in his presence and not feeling good and feeling, your stomach and all the visceral feelings that we get and everything. And of course, your community not knowing why. And instead of, hey, we're not okay. I'm not going to fake this. We're not still friends. We're not and the way I see it is that's a gift to the relationship, which I know you don't care about at this point,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to give the person the opportunity, I think, this is the invitation.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think there's still risk involved here, but to course correct, right? And he may not pick up that clue you're so
Mm-hmm.
generously handing to him, and that's good information for you.
Yeah.
But to not, I'm really interested in this not having it come out sideways. When I'm upset about something and I'm not being direct in my communication with that person, it comes out. It comes out in other ways.
Yeah. I've noticed I've been having more, like craving more sweets this week. Like my food is just a little bit off. Not anything terrible. And there's no judgment, but I'm definitely aware that it is coming out, and I'm fine if I don't talk about it. And then as soon as I start talking about it, I just feel like, that dysregulation. I think that this is really common as people that are deep thinkers and deep feelers, that sense of dysregulation, upset stomach, headache, nausea, thinking about things, heart pounding it's uncomfortable, and trying to weigh out, is it worth it to be dysregulated to deal with this? And like you said, it's still going on even when he's not here. And I pride myself on being pretty good about being assertive, but it's so interesting. There are a couple areas right now where I just feel like it's just hard. It is really, really hard. And it's hard to not have like some judgment around that.
I just want to validate how hard it is. It is really, really hard. And I'm curious about the judgment that's coming up for you, right? If it's self-judgment or any kind of self-violence, because you make sense in this context and in this larger context. And the reasons why this is uncomfortable are real.
Yeah. I'm tearful, as you said that, like I'm feeling really tearful. And I'm wondering if it's about feeling gaslit for so many years of my life, of coming back and saying that's not okay. And somebody going like, what are you talking about? Because I'm already wanting to minimize this. Well, what if I did tell somebody? But had the communication just been about, hey, I shared something with you and I heard from somebody else that same information. And if you're sharing information, I'm really uncomfortable with that. That would have been very, very different in my mind than all of this other baggage that we've talked about that was really not necessary and not pertinent to just the content.
Well, I think this is really, really relevant and really important right now on a big scale, because what we're talking about, and there's been a lot written about this lately. I'll see if I can find some of the articles for the show notes about, as women have gained this financial independence, right? And it's no longer the glue that's holding everything together, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that there's divorces and marriages are what they are today, it's like, oh, back in the old days, like people made it work. It's like, no, back in the old days, women couldn't leave.
Mm-hmm.
Or it was very, very difficult to, if you didn't have a
Mm-hmm.
certain, very specific set of circumstances, right? Because you couldn't access credit, you couldn't access mortgages, there was lots of rules. Go back far
Mm-hmm.
enough, you couldn't vote. Go back far enough, you were that person's property.
Mm-hmm.
Spousal rape was only taken out of like the legal things in 1999, I believe.
Right.
That just tells you like what's going on. So where I was going was, there's been a lot written lately that men, unfortunately, because I don't think patriarchy, white supremacy, things like that serve anybody very well,
Mm-hmm.
as far, at least psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And there's very few that it benefits power and financially. Like most of us doesn't do anything good for us. And it certainly doesn't do anything good emotionally, spiritually, psychologically for those people that it does benefit power-wise.
Yeah.
And I know that we all have layers of privilege, and I know there's a lot more nuance that goes into that, but I'm just speaking really kind of broadly. There's a lot being written right now about how men don't have the skill set to be in healthy relationships.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great article that came out recently from the Gottman Institute. And we know that marriages benefit men. They don't benefit women so much.
Right.
And I'm talking about heterosexual marriages here. The research did speak to how same-sex marriages do better, both women and men, interestingly. I'll see if I got to find this article for you. So it came out of John Gottman's work, right? And something like only 35% of men have the skills. And that's not, so it's being studied in marriage, but I think it's pretty safe to say that those skills are not really being used very widely anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, studies have shown that women are healthier when they're not married and men are healthier when they are married. And Jen, you and I have talked about how much we tend to overfunction. And I think this is common as HSPs, that we notice details, we notice the things that need to be done, that mental load and being in charge of all the things that need to happen. And just it's easier to take care of it than to have to ask and delegate. And so we tend to overfunction, which means that our partners often are not called to task to show up in the relationship at the level that, I don't want to say that we do, but in a greater degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm curious about, listeners, is if this resonates for you, I would love to hear from you. You can shoot me an email at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your feedback. I know that this is my process and I'm very clear about that, but I'm just really curious to know, because I feel very confident that many of you relate to this. And so would you say something? Would you not say something? What do you do when things are hard? If you have a story, tell me. And if we get enough responses and there's interest, Jen and I can do a follow-up episode. If you shoot me an email, let me know if you want me to keep you anonymous and we could talk about this more. But I think that this is so common. I really do. And I just feel like I'm so up against myself on this. And that's tough. That's a tough place for me to be, because it's not a typical place, and this feels like it's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I know one thing that you said before we hit record was, and I think you might have mentioned it since we've been recording.
Mm-hmm.
As therapists, it is something that we challenge and talk our clients through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I love the humility involved with, like, yeah, now it's my turn.
Yeah.
And I always say my role with clients is to obviously never tell them what to do. And they have my support 1,000%, no matter what they
Mm-hmm.
choose, because they're in charge of their lives. And there's very good reason. It's so multifaceted. Sometimes why we make the decisions we make, but we explore. What would it be like? And I always say, like, I'm not advocating this. I just want to explore this. Like,
Sure.
what might it be like to, I was thinking the short-term discomfort of confronting versus the long-term discomfort of stuffing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then
Yeah.
I'm really curious too, because we are talking about really wider societal issues here about how do we make things like this change? They change
Mm-hmm.
slowly. I'm terrified they might slide backwards.
Mm-hmm.
But then, so my question would be, like, what support do you need? Like, how do we write this? How do we begin educating men? There's a lot of great people thinking about this and beginning to, or continuing to do this work. I think it's going to hit more mainstream, which would be awesome.
Yeah.
And I know we're doing it already as parents. The parents that I speak to, it's really about being very conscious. And we've been doing this for a while.
Yeah. There must be something in me that this is hitting something that's very, very young. I can feel the tears coming, because when you were talking, I'm like, okay, everybody show up to San Diego and we'll all go talk to Melvin together.
Yes.
Like that it is a really young part that feels like I don't have a voice. What I have to say is going to be negated. It's not valued. And it's like, I need a posse of women around me to be heard and seen. And like, I want to say to put him in his place, but it's really this big feeling of disempowerment, feeling incredibly disempowered, and that wanting to have all of you around me to have the courage to talk to him. And I'm just going to let it be what it is, because that's my fantasy. And there's obviously something very, very young and disempowered around this for me.
Yes. I'll come to San Diego.
Okay.
I know that's not the point. I'm kind of making it a little, making it light there, but I hear you, right? It is coming from a young place. I mean, it's coming from that invalidation. And this is why protection matters.
Yeah.
Right. This is why laws matter. This is why these things matter. Protection, so that you feel empowered, backed up by, your friends, backed up by society at large, right? That you're not disempowered.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to a couple episodes that I did on being blindsided. You can look them up if you just search blindsided. That it was the same thing of a man making a decision on my behalf about a group that I was in and dropping me from the group. And I think in that episode, I talked about there's this history in my life of men making decisions on my behalf without me being part of that. And it started at a very young age. And I think that there's a common thread here of why that part of me feels so small and disempowered, and then that cognitive dissonance of I'm a grown woman and what's he going to do to me? But really feeling in that very young place. And I'm sure that this is very relatable. This is stuff I talk about with my clients all the time. I'm just on the other side of it right now for today.
Absolutely. No, that young
Mm.
part of you really needs support and validation because that's right what she didn't get.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I think that's all I have to say about this, Jen. How about you?
I think I have a lot more to say, but I think I should probably shut up now. I think I should go get my thoughts in a little bit better organized.
No, I think you
But
did a great job. Are you having any gremlins?
am I having any gremlins right now? I always kind of have gremlins. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have
I
that
do too.
executive function that has a good sense of like my performance or like how I did or
Mm-hmm.
even that great of a memory, honestly. But so those are very familiar. I'm like, hi guys, those gremlins I know really, really well. I do want to kind of crawl through the screen here and give you a big hug.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple thoughts because I do know some very, very sensitive men that struggle. I think hearing conversations like this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they want to, see a new world. And I just want to invite them, like, we need you. We need you
Mm-hmm.
to be that upstander, when you
Mm-hmm.
see this happening. And that I know very sincere, good men too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
don't want to. And, I guess I would invite any listener who happens to be male, if hearing women's stories like this is striking a nerve or making you angry, I just invite you to get really curious about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if there's anything that I've said that implies that men are not okay, that's certainly not my intention.
I'm
I
more worried
shared.
about me than you.
Okay.
No, and I echo that. Yeah,
Well, and
go
I
ahead.
think it's hard that when you are an oppressed group, it's hard because we haven't had power and we have been told that we just need to smile and be pretty. And, you layer that over the sensitivity and all the wounding. And then as we were talking, I was thinking about being a person of color, which would just make this dynamic 5 million times worse in all the ways that people of color have to juggle just to navigate and survive in the world. So we all have our
Absolutely. I think
stuff.
women of color are like just amazing.
Yeah. 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 So if for any reason we said anything that feels hurtful or offensive, feel free to send us a gentle note and bring it to our attention. We will certainly look at it. We will address it.
Or even not gentle, honestly. They can
Yeah.
direct those to me because I
Yeah.
think that it's important. I think yeah.
That's Jen at Heartfulness Consulting.
Yeah, I think I can hear it without tape. Yeah, well, whatever. I'm
I
gonna shut
think
up
you
now.
can. I think you can. And I would love for any harsh comments, send them to Jen.
Yes, please. No, I want to learn. Like I do,
Yeah.
and I know you do too.
Yeah.
And I do hope that good or bad, if anyone has some strong feelings, because really, about all this is kind of boiling down to being authentic
Mm-hmm.
and not living under these stereotypes, expectations. It's about validating people, right? It's about validating their experiences, and yeah, it's kind of like with
Yeah.
marriages, like the two people aren't in the same marriage,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm not in the same relationship. Like we're
Yeah.
not in the same relationship. Christine's my partner's in a relationship with me, and I'm in a relationship with her, and it's different. Like, and so we don't have to. We have to listen to each other. We have to listen to each other's experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if this is going to happen, but as you were talking, I just had this little like blip of, and I knew this. I'm more comfortable writing a response so that I don't have to experience the dysregulation in the moment and communicate. And I just may write a response and just pass it on to Melvin.
Yeah,
And that may be because when you were talking about humans, like we're all in this, we're all humans, like that helped to, at least in the moment, feel more empowered and, communicating to human. My voice is important. My experience is important.
absolutely. And I mean,
Yeah.
I bet if Melvin could come at us with some authenticity and some vulnerability, there's a story there that would probably break our hearts,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
But we can't get through those layers of I'm going to control you and we're friends now and you're not going to say anything to anybody.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm going to rewrite the history book. It's pervasive, that
Yeah.
human tendency to want to control.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for being here, Jen. I appreciate it.
Of course. My pleasure.
Have a great day, everybody. Hey again. So I'm curious, did this hit home for you or not? My guess is that it did, and we all struggle with this stuff. If you want to share your stories with me, I would love to hear. In spite of the fact that I'm personally struggling with this is not the case in all situations. And this is something that comes up a lot with my clients, and we do talk about it and work through it. If you are looking for support, you're welcome to reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com or Jen at Heartfulness Consulting. We both love helping all of you thrive and do the best that you can. And having struggles and being human is just part of what we go through. I don't care if you're a therapist, I don't care who you are. We have struggles, and having our people around us, having that unconditional love and support, that's what Jen and I rock at. And I think that's where a tremendous amount of the healing comes from. Learning tools, having information, education, support, validation. If you haven't gotten that, then that's fundamental for moving on to what the next steps are. But, the connection that Jen and I have is something that we really work on. We work on the vulnerability and communication. And if you're craving that, we would love to help you practice getting that. And how that happens is practicing in a safe relationship with someone. And I just had this come up with a client this week that we talked about our relationship because something came up, and me creating safety of if that upset you, if that made you angry. It was around a cancellation, a potential cancellation, and me having a cancellation policy. Did that bring up anything for you? Do you want to talk about it? I will not get upset. That's how we learn how to do these risks and vulnerabilities in relationships. And it's such a beautiful gift to have it that I would love for each and every one of you to have it. If it's not with me or Jen, with somebody else, because it's really, really transformative. I think that's all I have. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's your superpower. Have a blessed day.